There's a strange kind of solitude that comes with being underestimated. Not the loud kind. Not the kind where people openly mock you or tell you you're not enough. The silent kind? The kind where you sit in a meeting knowing the answer before anyone finishes the question and say nothing. Because last time you spoke up, the room went silent in a way that felt less like respect and more like confusion. The kind where you spent years downplaying what you notice, softening what you understand, pretending not to see the patterns that leap out at you like neon signs in a dark room. Because every time you let someone glimpse how your mind actually works, they looked at you differently, not with admiration, with distance. If you have ever felt this, if you have ever suspected in a quiet corner of yourself that you might be sharper than you give yourself credit for, but have learned to hide it, then what you are about to hear might be the most honest psychological truth of something you have always quietly suspected about yourself. Because psychology tells a completely different story about what intelligence actually looks like. It does not look like a high IQ score. It does not look like being the loudest person in the room. It does not look like having all the answers. In fact, many of the most intelligent people on this planet walk through their lives convinced they are ordinary. Because the very signs that prove their intelligence are the same signs that make them feel different, alone, and perpetually out of step with everyone around them. Today, we are going to explore 7 signs that your mind is operating at a level most people never reach, 7 patterns that psychology has identified as markers of high intelligence, but that almost no one recognizes in themselves. And the 7th sign is the one that changes everything. Sign 1. You feel like an outsider in your own life. Let us start with the sign that most intelligent people feel, but rarely express. You have probably experienced this hundreds of times without ever knowing what to call it. You are at a social event, and everyone around you seems to be enjoying themselves. They laugh. They trade small stories. They move through the room with an ease that looks almost choreographed. But you are there and you are not there. Part of you is watching the scene from a distance, even while standing in the middle of it. You participate well enough. You smile at the right moments. But underneath, there is a quiet sense that you are witnessing life more than inhabiting it. Psychology has a name for this experience, though it is not widely discussed. The Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski identified what he called intellectual overexcitability, a heightened cognitive activation that causes certain individuals to process reality with an intensity that most people never experience. Your brain does not passively receive information. It analyzes, questions, compares, and synthesizes constantly, automatically, whether you want it to or not. And here is what this creates. When you are surrounded by people who process the world at a surface level, you feel like a deep-sea creature that has accidentally surfaced. The pressure is wrong. The light is wrong. The way people communicate, the shorthand, the small talk, the unspoken agreement not to go too deep, feels like a language you were never taught. This is not arrogance. You are not looking down on anyone. In fact, most highly intelligent people spend their lives genuinely puzzled about why connection feels so difficult. They assume something is wrong with them, but nothing is wrong. Your brain simply processes in higher resolution. And when you are a high-resolution mind in a standard-definition social environment, the gap is not a flaw in you. It is a difference in processing depth. Sign 2. You're exhausted by things that energize everyone else. This second sign is the one that makes intelligent people believe they are fragile, when in fact, they are running a more capable engine. You know this experience. You attend a party, and by the end of the first hour, you feel like you have run a marathon, while everyone around you seems energized, refueled, ready for more. You go to a networking event, and after 3 conversations, your brain feels like a browser with 40 tabs open, each one trying to process a different person's emotional state, unspoken intentions, and hidden motives. You come home and need silence. Real silence. Not background noise, not a podcast, nothing. And then you watch other people. They go from the party to the after party. They attend back-to-back meetings all day and then go out for dinner. They seem to run on a fuel source you do not have access to. And you wonder, quietly and with some guilt, if you are simply weaker. Less resilient. Built wrong for the challenges of normal life. Here is what neuroscience actually tells us. Your brain is not weaker. It is processing more information per second than the average person's brain. Every social situation, every conversation, every environment you enter, your mind is running a multi-layered analysis in the background, reading micro-expressions, tracking inconsistencies between words and tone, comparing what is being said against what you know to be true, projecting where this interaction is going based on dozens of previous interactions stored in your memory. Most people's brains are running a handful of background processes. Your brain is running a supercomputer. Cognitive load theory explains exactly what is happening here. Every human has a finite amount of cognitive processing power, but the rate at which different minds consume that capacity varies enormously. A highly intelligent person processes more deeply, more thoroughly, and across more dimensions, which means they reach cognitive exhaustion faster. You are not weak for needing to retreat. You are full. There is a difference. The same cognitive depth that makes you perceptive, insightful, and capable of understanding complex systems. That is the same cognitive depth that tires you faster. The cost and the gift are the same thing. If you have ever felt guilty about needing more rest than others, more silence, more solitude, stop. Your brain is not being lazy. It is recovering from doing more work in 1 hour than most people's brains do in an entire day. Sign 3. You can't accept answers that don't actually answer the question. This next sign is the one that has probably gotten you labeled as difficult more times than you can count. And it is also one of the strongest indicators of genuine intelligence. Here is how it works. Someone gives you an explanation, and on the surface, it sounds fine. It is logical enough. It satisfies everyone else in the room. But inside you, something will not settle. Not because you want to argue, not because you are trying to prove you are smarter, but because you can feel it. There is a gap, a piece missing, an assumption that was never examined, a conclusion that was reached too quickly. You ask the follow-up question, and then another. And sometimes, if you are not careful, another after that. And you watch the person's expression shift. First curiosity, then mild annoyance, then something closer to defensiveness. You were not trying to corner them. You were trying to understand, but they experienced your questions as a challenge. This is not a personality flaw. It is what psychologists call need for cognition, a stable personality trait that describes how much a person enjoys and seeks out effortful, cognitive activity. People high in need for cognition do not just tolerate complexity. They desire it. A simple answer that does not address the underlying question creates a kind of cognitive tension that will not go away until it is scratched. You cannot just move on. Your brain will not let you. Research from the University of Heidelberg found that individuals high in need for cognition process arguments more carefully, are more resistant to persuasion by weak evidence, and show greater activity in the prefrontal cortex during reasoning tasks. Their brains literally refuse to take shortcuts. And here is the paradox. In a world that rewards speed, confidence, and quick decisions, your unwillingness to accept shallow answers can make you look slow, difficult, or overly careful. But what is actually happening is that your brain is doing what intelligent brains are supposed to do. It is thinking, really thinking, not performing thinking, not rushing to a conclusion to look decisive, actually working through the problem. The next time someone tells you to stop overanalyzing, hear this instead. Your mind is simply functioning at a depth that surface-level answers cannot reach. You were not built to skim, you were built to dive. And the people who skim will always finish first, but they will also miss everything below the surface. Sign 4. You feel guilt for seeing what others miss. Now we arrive at one of the most psychologically intricate signs, and one that almost no one talks about. You notice things. The half-second hesitation before someone says they are happy for you. The subtle change in energy when a certain person enters the room. The contradiction between what someone is saying and what their body is showing. You see the insecurity beneath the confidence, the anger beneath the smile, the hidden purpose beneath the kind words. And then, here's the part that matters. You feel guilty about it. Guilty because you know something you were not told. Guilty because you can see through a mask that someone is working hard to keep in place. Guilty because your perception feels almost intrusive, as if you are reading a diary that was left open on a table. You did not ask for this information. You did not go looking for it, but your brain delivered it anyway, and now you have to carry it. This experience has a psychological explanation rooted in two systems operating simultaneously. The first is pattern recognition, your brain's ability to detect inconsistencies between what is being shown and what is actually there. Highly intelligent people have faster, more accurate pattern recognition. They notice differences that others filter out. The second system is empathy, specifically affective empathy, the capacity to feel what others are feeling. When these two systems combine, you do not just detect that someone is hiding pain. You feel their pain while knowing they are hiding it. And that creates a specific kind of moral conflict. You know something true about another person that they have chosen not to share. Do you acknowledge it and risk exposing them? Do you ignore it and carry the weight of unspoken knowledge? Do you offer help they did not ask for and risk crossing a line? Most people never face this tension because they never see enough to trigger it. You face it constantly, and it exhausts you in a way that is impossible to explain to anyone who has never experienced it. Here is what you need to understand. You are not judgmental. Judgment would feel satisfied. Judgment would feel superior. What you feel is the opposite, a burden. And the guilt you carry is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that your conscience is fully alive. You see clearly, and you care deeply. That combination is rare. It is also heavy, but it is not a flaw. Sign 5. You were the mature for your age child who became the exhausted adult. And now I want to take you somewhere most people never go, because this sign connects your present to your past in a way that changes everything. Think back to your childhood for a moment. How many times were you told you were mature for your age? An old soul, wise beyond your years. Adults moved towards you. You had conversations with teachers that other children could not have. You understood things, family tension, emotional undercurrents, unspoken truths, long before anyone explained them to you. And at the time, this felt like a compliment. It was delivered as one. You were proud of it, in the way children are proud of being treated like adults. But here is what no one told you. Psychologists call this asynchronous development, a pattern common in highly intelligent children where cognitive development significantly surpasses emotional and social development. Your mind understood adult-sized concepts years before your heart was ready to handle them. You processed complex emotional information with a child's coping mechanisms. You absorbed the weight of adult realities with a child's nervous system. And now, as an adult, you are exhausted in a way that feels older than your years. Not physically tired, not sleep-deprived, something deeper. A kind of existential weariness that comes from having carried a heavy mind for as long as you can remember. The psychologist Lita Hollingworth, who studied gifted children in the early 20th century, observed something remarkable. She noted that highly intelligent children often experience what she called the early awareness of ultimate concerns. Death, injustice, suffering, the vastness of the unknown. While other children were playing, You were processing questions that most adults spend their lives avoiding. This is not about having a difficult childhood. It is about having a mind that started asking big questions before it had the emotional foundation to hold the answers. And if you have spent your adult life feeling like you are always a little more tired than everyone else, a little more weighted down, a little more aware of how heavy existence can be, you are not weak. You have simply been carrying weight longer than most people have known it existed. The reframe is this: you did not peak early and burn out. You started processing earlier at a deeper level, and you have been running a marathon while everyone else was still at the starting line. The exhaustion is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you have been working harder, thinking deeper, and carrying more for longer than anyone ever recognized. Sign 6. You can hold two contradictory truths without breaking. This sixth sign is perhaps the most cognitively advanced marker of intelligence, and the one that makes you feel paradoxically the least sure about everything. Most people need the world to be simple. They need clear villains and clear heroes. They need to be right, and for the other side to be wrong. They find comfort in certainty, even if that certainty is built on an incomplete foundation. But you cannot do this. Not because you lack conviction, but because your mind refuses to ignore the parts of reality that do not belong. You can understand exactly why someone hurt you, the childhood wound that formed them, the fear that drove them, the context that explains their behavior, and still hold them accountable for the damage they caused. You can see the flaws in an argument you agree with and the merit in an argument you challenge. You can believe something deeply and simultaneously understand why a reasonable person might believe the opposite. This is not indecision. This is not weakness of character. This is what developmental psychologists call cognitive complexity. The ability to combine multiple perspectives, tolerate ambiguity, and resist the urge to collapse complexity into simplicity. And it is consistently associated with higher intellectual capacity. The psychologist Jean Piaget described the highest stage of cognitive development as the capacity for formal operational thought, the ability to think abstractly, to reason about hypotheticals, to consider options that do not yet exist, but later researchers, particularly those studying adult cognitive development, identified something beyond this. They called it dialectical thinking, the ability to hold opposing ideas simultaneously and recognize that truth often lives somewhere in the space between them. Here is why this matters for you. In a world that increasingly demands that you pick a side, declare a tribe, and defend your position without hesitation, your inability to do so can feel like a weakness. You watch people around you speak with absolute certainty about things that are deeply uncertain, and you wonder if something is wrong with you for seeing the gray when everyone else sees only black and white. But the gray is where intelligence lives. Certainty is cheap. Anyone can be certain. It requires no cognitive effort to pick a side and defend it with selective evidence. What requires intelligence is the willingness to hold complexity, to sit with uncertainty, and to keep thinking when the world is telling you to stop. If you have ever been accused of being indecisive, of sitting on the fence, of refusing to choose, hear this. You are not failing to think. You are thinking at a level that most people never achieve, and the discomfort you feel is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are seeing the full picture, while others are only seeing the piece that confirms what they already know. Sign 7. You are terrified of your own potential. And now we arrive at the 7th sign, the one that changes everything, the one almost no one talks about, because it is the hardest to confess, even to yourself. You know somewhere quiet inside you that you are capable of more than you are currently doing, not in an arrogant way, not in the way of someone who thinks they are better than everyone else, in a quiet, almost hidden way. a knowing that lives beneath your daily routines and your comfortable excuses. You have glimpsed it in moments when you lost yourself in a project and produced something that amazed even you. When someone you respect looked at your work and said genuinely that it was extraordinary. When you felt for a fleeting hour or a single evening what it might feel like to operate at your full ability. And then you pulled back. You did not pursue the opportunity as hard as you could have. You did not finish the project that was starting to attract attention. You told yourself you were being realistic, practical, humble. But underneath those reasonable explanations was something else, something closer to fear. The psychologist Abraham Maslow called this the Jonah complex, the fear of one's own greatness, the evasion of one's full potential. He observed across decades of studying human motivation that many people are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of their own highest possibilities, because if you truly try, if you give everything you have and commit without reservation, and you still fall short, then the verdict is final. But if you hold back, if you never fully commit, you can always tell yourself the comforting story. I could have if I had really tried. This is not laziness. It is not a lack of ambition. It is a psychological protection mechanism. So subtle that most people never recognize it in themselves. And here is the cruel paradox. The more intelligent you are, the more clearly you can see your own potential. And the more frightening that potential becomes. Because you understand with a clarity that less perceptive people lack exactly what would be required to realize it. The sacrifice, the visibility, the vulnerability of putting something real into the world and risking that it might be dismissed. A less intelligent person might charge forward without seeing the cost. You see everything, and sometimes seeing everything is what keeps you still. Here is the truth you need to hear. Your fear of your own potential is not evidence that you are inadequate. It is evidence that you know with absolute certainty that you are holding back. If you were truly average, truly incapable, truly limited, there would be nothing to fear. You would have no potential to run from. The fact that you are afraid tells you something vital. There is something real inside you that you have not yet allowed to exist fully in the world, and the question that will define the rest of your life is not whether you are smart enough, capable enough, or talented enough. The question is whether you are willing to stop running from what you already know you could become. If you recognized yourself in these signs, if you felt at any point in this video a quiet recognition that someone was finally putting words to something you have always known but never shared, I want you to sit with this for a moment. You have probably spent years underestimating your own mind, not because you lack confidence in the way that word is usually used, but because you know deeply how much you do not know. You see the vastness of what you have not yet understood, and that awareness makes you feel small. But that very awareness, the ability to perceive the limits of your own knowledge, is itself one of the most reliable markers of high intelligence that psychology has ever found. The people who are most certain of their own brilliance are almost always the people who have the least reason to be. The people who doubt, who question, who lie awake at night wondering if they are good enough, those are the people whose minds are actually working at full strength, not despite the doubt, because of it. You feel like an outsider because you process the world in higher resolution. You tire faster because your brain is doing more work per second than most people's brains do in an hour. You cannot accept shallow answers because your mind was built for depth. You feel guilt for what you perceive because you combine sharp insight with genuine empathy. You carry an exhaustion older than your years because you started processing complexity when you were still a child. You hold contradictions without breaking because you have reached a level of thinking that most people never touch, and you are afraid of your own potential, not because you lack courage, but because you can see with painful clarity exactly what you are able of. These are not signs that something is wrong with you. These are signs that your mind is functioning at a level that most of the world does not understand, and has never learned to see. If this video spoke to something you have been carrying quietly, leave a comment and tell me which sign resonated most. I read every single one. And if you have not subscribed, this is exactly the moment. Every video on this channel is designed to help you understand your mind so clearly that you stop underestimating it. Thank you for being here until this moment. I am Turnwiser. And remember, the version of you that thinks too much, feels too deeply, and questions everything is not the version you need to fix. It is the version the world needs more of.